Most people make a budget to get by. You should make a budget, not to get by, but to get ahead. Your budget shouldn't leave you living paycheck to paycheck, but it should leave you with money left over so that you can save and invest in your goals. I was speaking to my grandmother about budgeting, and she told me that she balances her checkbook by hand, which means that she writes down all of her income and all of her expenses each and every month. Talking to her further about budgeting, she told me that she did not ever make enough money for her to invest. Most people use budgeting as a strategy to be able to pay their bills. You should use budgeting not as a strategy to pay your bills, but as a strategy to reach your goals. Proverbs 21:20 says, "The wise have wealth and luxury, but fools spend what they have." This tells us that if you want to be wise with money, you have to go beyond the category of spending. There are 5 things that you can do with your money. You can spend it, you can save it, you can invest it, you can give it, and you can lose it. How well you do these 5 things will determine your financial future. I have 8 suggested budgeting categories for you. The first one is housing, and this covers things such as your rent, your mortgage, your garbage, electricity, water, any expense that could be associated with your housing. The second one is food. This covers things such as groceries, fast food, delivery, restaurants, coffee, dessert, and even more. The third one is transportation. This covers your car insurance, your gas, your ride share, and even public transportation. The fourth one is personal. This covers any expense for yourself, like your clothing, your entertainment, your self-care products, or anything that you are spending on yourself. The fifth one is saving, and this covers things like when you're saving for a vacation or a car or a new home or home repair or remodel your home, any of those big purchases that you're saving for. The sixth one is giving, and this covers giving to places like the church or nonprofit organizations. The seventh one is debt. The eighth one is miscellaneous, and it covers anything that weren't covered in the first 7. So as you enter into different seasons of your life, you may need to add to these categories or take away from these categories. But once you have your budgeting categories, then you can go into your budgeting percentages. Let's play red light, green light to understand budgeting percentages. Your housing expenses should only be 25 to 35% of your net income. If it's around 25%, you're in the green. But if it's 35% or above, you're in the red and you better watch out. Your food expenses should only be 5 to 15% of your income. If it's 5% of your income, you're in the green. If it's 15 or above, then you are in the red. Your transportation should only be 5 to 15% of your income. If it's 5%, you're in the green. If your car note is pushing you above 15%, then you are definitely in the red. When it comes to your saving, if you're 10% or less, then you're in the red. But if you're 20% or around that, then you're definitely in the green. For your personal expenses, it should be between 5 and 15%. If you're spending 5% on personal expenses, you're in the green. If you're spending 15%, you're definitely in the red. Your giving should be between 5 and 15%. If you're spending less than 5%, then you're in the red. And if you're above 10%, then you're in the green. It's great to be generous. Your miscellaneous expenses should be between 5 and 15%. If it's 5%, you're green, 15, you're red, and your debt should be 10 to 20%. More than 20% on debt is definitely in the red, and 10% is in the green. And these budget percentages helps you to be able to reach your goals. If you spend more than 30% of your income on your home, then you're house poor. If you spend more than 10% of your income on your car, then you're car poor. If you have low savings, then you're cash poor. And if you do not give, then you just have a poor heart. And I'm not talking about poor people, I'm talking about poor habits. The first practical step that you can do is to create a budget. The first thing you do when creating a budget is to write out the different categories of expenses. After you write out those different categories, then you write the percentages that you want to assign to each of those categories. Make sure you balance out the percentages so they equal out to 100% each and every time. And then you should write an ideal budget. An ideal budget is ideally, in a good world, what would you want to spend in each category? This is based off of your financial vision and your financial goals and your preferences. It's unique to you and what you like. After you write out an ideal budget, then you should write out an actual budget. An actual budget is the numbers that you're actually spending on expenses today. The second practical step that you can take is to adjust your budget percentages. What you can do is you can look and make sure that your budget is aligning with your goals. Once your budget is aligning with your goals, you can look at the categories and percentages and you can adjust them. You can see where you may need to cut back on some discretionary spending and where you can add to places such as your saving or your giving. Saving and giving is usually the last thing that people think about when creating a budget. Most people just go spend money and whatever they have left over, that's what they choose to save and that's what they choose to give. But saving is important because it's one of the number one indicators to let us know how financially successful you will be in your future and if you'll be able to reach your financial goals. And if you're a Christian, then giving is definitely essential because God talks about how you seek Him first and His righteousness, and then all these other things He will add unto you. Practical step number 3 for you is to review and revise your budget. Your life situation changes, and so as life changes, your budget should change as well to reflect those changes. For me, for example, is I have 2 children under 2 years old and daycare is expensive. So my budget looks a lot different today than it looked 2 years ago for me. So your situation will change, and as your situation will change, you will have to change your budget. I created a budgeting video for each of the 8 different categories that I spoke about in this video. You can find them all on my page, but I recommend you starting off by watching my first video about budgeting for your housing expense.